Combat Thoughts. I'm Robbie.
I'm Lee.
And I'm Alex.
We're going to take a deeper look at culture and philosophy behind martial arts.
Talking about what the most important aspects in a coach are, and then maybe also what the most important aspects in a fighter and in a student are within MMA. Who wants to begin?
So we're focusing on coach first. What's the important thing about a coach? It's hard because are you talking about a head coach or a specific discipline coach?
Well, okay, so within MMA, I think we all accept that people aren't going to train under just one person. So I think we're looking at kind of maybe not necessarily head coach, but from from even at the early levels when you just have an MMA coach specifically, like your main coach. Yeah, I mean, I know you're going to go to other people for Ju-Jitsu and stuff like that. But I guess that's important as well if we look at the important aspects for your side coaches.
When you're talking about like important characteristics as a coach, from the if you go a bit further back, I'd say his success recently has waned a little bit. But back in the day, kind of Greg Jackson was like the strategist. He knew how to beat people. He knew how to come up with a good game plan. He watched tape, and it was kind of like as the kind of coach that sits at the top, having that ability to kind of formulate a strategy to beat somebody is like really important, but that only really comes into practice, as Robbie's just said, at the kind of top levels. When you're coming up in the sport, you tend to only have kind of one MMA coach. At that point, especially if you're having like your first, 10 or 15 fights, I think experience of a coach who's been in that position before and able to kind of calm your nerves, kind of tell you what's going on, talk you through how things are going to go, and kind of help the fighter develop confidence. One of the biggest things in the sport is being confident in fights. How many people do you know? I'm one of them. I'm better in the gym than I ever was competing. How many people need that help to be transitioned from being great in the gym into the cage or the ring? For me, having, especially early in your career, a coach that can really resonate with what you're doing, has kind of lived through it, has great experience of fighting, winning, losing, regional shows, kind of British, European titles, things like that, is really invaluable. Just, you see kind of the shows like Robbie we've been to, you see the guys coming through from kind of big gyms with big fighters. They come with a little bit of an entourage, and it can sometimes be perceived as a bit wanky, but there's a few of them there who have lived through it, and they're sharing experience. They're helping their fighter feel calm and confident. They're way better prepared in the event, because everybody kind of trains the same nowadays as well. Training's pretty similar.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to cover too much ground as we did before, because I think a while ago we did an episode on does a coach need to have fought in order to be an MMA coach? The conclusion we pretty solidly came to was that it wasn't about necessarily having fought, it's about being able to understand your fighter in that position. Which is why Greg Jackson, for example, is so good, even though he's never fought. Fighting is a good way for you to understand, but it's not necessarily the only way to understand. But that's more about, does a coach need to have fought or not? I kind of think the most important part in a coach doesn't actually change too much to go up. And I think it's what you kind of touched on about being able to calm them down and give them confidence. I think it's more about the psychological effect that you might have on a student. And it's about being able to instill that confidence and that discipline in them in general.
Yeah. I mean, how many coaches have you seen at shows who are really erratic and they're kind of inexperienced in that regard, and they're kind of happy for a day out? It's kind of the limelight's on them, and they're kind of like, oh, look at my fighters, I'm a big deal. I've brought kind of a few fighters to have a scrap. That to me is where it kind of becomes a bit bad coach.
I mean, so I guess that's maybe more. So we're talking more about here it seems to me like we're talking more about the time when the fight is happening. So it's the fight day or the week before the fight sort of thing, where these things are the most prominent, being able to psychologically sort of strengthen your fighter or help them.
I also think as
and
well in kind of lower level MMA, it's especially having the experience of doing a healthy weight cut. There's a skill to it, and if your coach isn't experienced in it and they just kind of let you sit in a bath and sweat and lose all your weight and feel like shit, there's good ways and bad ways of losing weight. We talked to Matty about it and how his performance kind of waned because he did bad weight cuts. I think having that coach to kind of help bring you to the fight and all the things that lead up to the fight, you feel confident, you feel prepared, but also you've had a good weight cut, you've refueled well, you're kind of brought to the cage in the best mental and physical circumstance.
I kind of disagree about the weight cut thing, because I kind of see that as it could be the same as your skills coach, right? It doesn't really matter who does it, whether it's your head coach telling you to do it or if it's a lower down coach telling you to do it. They need to give you that information. The head coach doesn't need to be the guy bringing you through that weight cut, so long as if you have enough trust in him and he delegates that guidance and taking you through the weight cut to someone else, you can trust that someone else. This is the thing. I don't think there's any sort of particular time that the head coach has to be there for him to be the most important guy. I think the head coach thing extends further back than just the weeks before the fight and the fight itself. It's like Marvin, for example, has absolute faith in people who he puts forwards, right? He doesn't let people fight unless they at least kind of know what they're doing. And the fact is that because I've seen him say, you can fight, you can't fight, and I know why he's making these decisions, when he says that someone can fight, I did, very much trust that he can see that they're going to do okay and not get hurt. It's about getting that trust in, and I trust him because he's got that, I don't know what you call it, that legitimacy that he's making these careful decisions. Again, it's about getting that psychological aspect of your fighter, that trust and that and that belief, I think, in a fighter is probably the most important aspect, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would say I agree largely, especially, it's so crucial for, I actually think probably the most important aspect of a coach is to be sort of a person who is able to forensically look at someone and understand them, what makes them tick, what gets them to be better at what they do, because different people have different ways of motivating themselves and things like that. They're also, being able to pick out what abilities they have, what they should focus on is also another thing. Because, sure, that could come down to you as a fighter, but I think part of as a coach, it is, it's for them to, it's good for a coach to be able to direct the fighter into the avenues that will make them better. So it's being able to analyze people and put them through the right trenches to to get them better.
But is that so? For me, I'm looking at a coach as a coach and a trainer are two different things in my head. And most of the time, your coach wears the trainer hat as well. A coach isn't solely just the person who kind of trains you. I think the training bit is separate completely. You kind of learn how to teach them the skills they need. A coach, for me, like you said, is to kind of know your fighter and kind of the experience of like, how do you deal with a kind of passive fighter who needs to win a round? How do you deal with somebody who needs to be screamed at in a corner? How do you deal when somebody's been cut or somebody has kind of had the nose broken? To be able to bring that together to the fighter at the time when they need it most, to kind of be like, right, you've got half. You've seen it in boxing where they've sent the fighter out and they've gone, you've got a round left. The ref is going to stop this. You've got a round left. The only way you're going to win this is knocking him out. Try this, this, and this. I think having a coach who's got that kind of ability to see the kind of holistic view of a fight and then say, right, you're getting smashed with leg kicks. You can't see it. I can. You need to do this. That experience for me is the invaluable bit of where the coach earns their money.
And also, but then in that same respect, he needs to know what kind of a person the fighter is, because like how do you motivate the fighter, right?
Exactly. How do you communicate that to the fighter to get to it?
Because different people will have different ways. Sometimes they need like being told, you're fucking losing this right now. You are like gonna fuck up. Get your shit together, blah, blah, like being more aggressive or being less aggressive in the way that you talk to the fighter.
Yeah. Me and Robbie went on a run last week and he was calling me fat through it, right? And that gets me going. If somebody's like, you can't do this, you're fat, I'm like, fuck you, I'm going to do it. I'm like, where that kind of lights a bit of a fire underneath me. If it's not as kind of, I like the kind of screamy and shouty approach. And I get it's not for everybody, but when I'm running and I'm tired and Robbie's going, run, you fat bastard, I'm like, you, fuck you. Like, I need that.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, though. I think it's about having good understanding of what motivates your fighter. I'd say that. And a head coach is someone who can motivate you, and I guess maybe I know how to motivate you. I don't know really how to motivate a lot of other people, but then we spend a lot of time together. You need your head coach to be someone who's keeping an eye on people in the gym, who knows how they behave, who knows when something's wrong. He's getting a bit sort of whimsical, but I feel like the most important point in your head coach and your your top guy is a bit sort of like sensei-ish. Which again might be weird to think of with some coaches. I mean, again, if we're talking about Marvin, he's a bit. He's loud. He's not like wise sensei master guy, but at the same time, he does have all the aspects like, really a lot of belief in the fighter. He gets a lot of trust out of the fighters. And he does know how to motivate people, because I hate the screaming and shouting thing. Like I can't stand it when people are doing it. But you know what what I have realized is that it's very much if someone's telling me to do it, I probably won't do it. I hate those classes where you've got like the drill sergeant like screaming at you. But I remember a couple of them. Like sometimes coaches will say, "Okay, you don't have to do the rest if you don't want to." And I'll be like, kind of want to now. I start smashing through it, and it feels like as soon as I get that autonomy, as soon as it's like on me, it's rather than someone being like, you have to do this, someone goes, it's up to you now. I'm a lot more motivated to do it.
Yeah, and this is it. That's exactly right. Different people have different ways to motivate themselves, and
I think the coach as well, and that loops back into the training. So you look at MMA now, and the way people are training MMA is way more scientific than it was 15, 20 years ago, say. But it's having that coach who's watching training sessions and kind of going, this is a good hard spar, this is too hard. These are good training partners for each other, this is a week out and they're a bit volatile. And then the other side of it is, you're overtrained, you're burning out, you're training too hard, the nerves have started to kick in, you've got to fight in 3 weeks. I can see you trying to do everything you can to kind of get there, maybe take a couple of days off, have a bit of a refeed, kind of make yourself feel a bit better. You've still got 3 weeks, don't peak and burn out too soon. All of that is the coach who's kind of overseeing training, taking you to the fight, is really important at getting you to the fight in the best condition you can possibly get to. You're not going to win every fight. Coaches don't win every fight. It's not the way it is. But if they can have a good approach where they're monitoring their fighters, they know how to motivate them, they know how to take them to the fight safely and well, but also they can control their training in a sense of, look, lads, he's fighting somebody who's great at leg kicks, and getting training partners in and bought into the kind of the methodology. Oh, we're going to work hard on leg kicks with Robbie this week. Alex is fighting a power puncher. Right, let's keep you moving to the right so you're moving away from the power. Stuff like that. It's kind of formulating the training around the requirements of the fighter.
Yeah. I think also one thing that kind of popped into my head is the fact that a coach, oh my God, I completely froze. I can't remember what I was going to say.
All right, let's carry on with it, and hopefully it'll come back to you. I think besides the okay, so we've got a couple bits. There's partly about, gaining the trust and knowing your fighters so that you can take instruction and you've got that credibility, but then furthermore that instruction is going to be good. That's why they have to be observant and know their fighters and understand how to guide you. I kind of think the other really important thing, especially in MMA nowadays, is being able to give your guys freedom to train what they want and to use the techniques they want. MMA style-wise is extremely diverse and has, too many different aspects for you to pick and choose exactly what you need to teach someone at any one time. I hate coaches who come in and say, I need you to train more like this, and it's often the way they train. I just think that is the absolute worst thing. And it's very common for people early in their coaching career to do this, because it's what they know best, right? If you bring in someone, if you need a student to teach a class, they're going to teach the stuff that they know really well.
Yeah.
That's not what you need out of a head coach. You need someone who's there to let you sort of explore the different martial arts and have the freedom to try out different things, because it's impossible to measure out every single bit of a fighter, especially early on.
Yeah, and if you're coming from Taekwondo or kind of more traditional martial arts, there's a lot of skill in that you can adapt over that kind of gets brought out of kind of people getting into the sport. If you have a coach who's Dutch style kickboxing, right hand, left hook, right kick, kind of over and over and over, it can really kind of break down the ability to kind of throw some fancy spinning shit, which does work in the right context. It's making sure, like you say, you're able to build your fighter up with the skills they have, the natural abilities they have, and then a bit of coaching on the top to kind of say, here's what people do to target that or to kind of counter that. It's kind of bringing that through. We've spoke about it before on another podcast where somebody said they kind of let them be free in the gym and kind of didn't prescribe anything. There was no kind of strict combos. Cameron. Yeah, but if you fucked up, they'd be like, right, here's where you fucked up. Here's why you got caught with that big right hand, because you've got this trait where your arm drops or so on. I think that's important as well, is giving the freedom, but also correcting people when fundamental mistakes are going wrong.
I mean, that's one. I think it just came back to me what I was going to say, and it's like another very important aspect is honesty, right? You don't want a coach who's always a yes man. Is like you need, of course, you don't also want someone. Again, this comes down to knowing the person, because there are people who, if you shit on them all the time, you're gonna ruin them. But there are people who, if you like criticize them a lot, it builds them up. So it's hard. It's like it's difficult to build that balance. But you need that honesty. You need to be able to be, critically criticizing someone on their techniques, on their progress, so that their progress is legit. It's not.
So I've been watching. There's a guy on YouTube. I'd give him a shout out, but I think his YouTube channel would get taken down because he posts basically 25-minute videos of the Ultimate Fighter series in a nutshell and kind of the important bits what happened. I've been watching them recently. I watched the one with Matt Hughes, and his coaching approach was just break people down, beat the shit out of them, berate them, just give them a torrid time. And it was kind of the break people down, bringing them back up stronger, break them back down, bring them back. Quite an old school way of training. that does work for some people, but for a lot of people, especially in that Ultimate Fighter, it really fucking didn't. There's people crying, there was people kind of kicking off, and it's like Robbie just said, it's that one style of coaching that's probably worked for him, or the coaching he's received worked for him. That then being prescribed onto other people isn't always the way forward. But yeah, Matt Hughes he wasn't a good guy in the Ultimate Fighter. He was.
There's a BJJ gym who's pretty notorious for being savage as well. I think it's called like Daisy. I know it's their gym is in an old laundrette, and they just go insane. There's a bit on Flow Grappling about them.
I'll look them up. Doesn't matter about the name.
I can't remember.
We'll get sidetracked.
Yeah. But yeah, they have a bit on Flow Grappling about them, and it's exactly that style. It's like, if you don't, you have to be going hard all the time. You have to roll hard all the time.
It's kind of like the shooter box of BJJ then.
Yeah.
The thing is, those gyms can churn out very effective fighters. I mean, as you said, shooter box, like they produced some fantastic fighters, and having very limited coaching styles can be quite effective. I think the trouble is that you will miss out on a lot of other people. So there's people that the style works for, and there are styles that work commonly for quite a lot of people. You'll get them, and you'll make them really good, but you'll miss out on so many others, which is why I think that certain gyms, like City Kickboxing, for example, I was just listening to a podcast by the Sonny Brown Breakdown, really good, and he was talking to I don't know exactly what his role is, if it's head coach or if it's like a psychological coach or something. But he's talking about how he'll look at people and work out what motivates them. And it's a gym like that, which is churning out some really good guys, right? And quite a lot of them, and quite diverse styles. Clearly, they're finding ways to motivate each individual person. Whereas Shooterbox, someone came from Shooterbox gym, you know what they're going to be like. Like, I don't know if they're necessarily going to be a grappler or a striker, but you know they're going to be full on.
Yeah, and it's that one, because there's loads of gyms. Like when I was doing Thai boxing as a kid, you knew the gyms in my local area which had different styles, and it was I'd go to different gyms because I knew this gym was great at front kicks, so I'd go and train there for a couple of weeks. I'd do like a Wednesday, Thursday night there because I'd get inspired and they'd front kick the shit out of me, and I wanted to get better at that. I think that's changing in terms of coaching. I think we are becoming a bit more kind of well-rounded and allowing people to be flexible. But I think we shouldn't underestimate the value of a gym where they're really good at something and they're kind of bringing their fighters through to kind of give them a good right kick or make them really aggressive or give them a good Dutch-style kickboxing approach. I think there's still merit in that.
Oh, for sure. But I think that comes more down to the, if you were talking about the differences between a trainer and a coach, that comes more down to the trainers rather than the coaches. Yeah. If they have a good switch kick, for example, right? Because if someone's really good at teaching switch kicks and good at setting them up, you can teach anyone a good switch kick. It's more about how they implement it into their game. Because, a switch kick can be set up in all manner of different ways and in all manner of different fighting styles, whether you're very aggressive, whether you're trying to pull them onto your strikes, whether you're trying to counter. The switch kick itself is dependent on how good the trainer is at teaching you switch kicks, not at how good the coach is at motivating you and in sort of inspiring you and gaining your trust.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
So if we were then to throw this onto fighters, what the important aspects of a fighter are, where would we start?
Well, I think it's going to come down to has to be ability to learn, surely. Whether that's by whether that's by you're willing to have hard work, or whether you're just and grind out something, or whether you are, very receptive to new information, or whether you're very self-motivated in searching for things. At the end of the day, we're students and athletes, right? And from the student side of things, being able to take on information, whether by hard work or intelligence, clearly has to be the most important aspect.
Mm-hmm. Everybody says it in MMA, and it's a bit of a cliche, but it's true. If a fighter's coachable, you can do a lot with them. And if they take on the information, it doesn't matter, like Robbie's saying, around if they pick the information up themselves or if they're told it. It doesn't matter. That then becomes onto the coach. But if they're receptive to new information and they're willing to listen and learn, they go to a new trainer, or they get a trainer in, or they're sparring and the coach is saying, look, you need to do this, this, and this. Having that arrogance is one of like the biggest ways to put a glass ceiling on your progression.
Yeah.
You see a lot of fighters knock people out and get that bloodlust for knocking people out. I'm going to knock people out. I'm going to knock people out.
Yeah.
And they don't upgrade anything else. And that can just, it puts the ceiling there straight away.
And then you get to a point where even in careers, I think of fighters like the one that comes to mind for me is Joanna Jędrzejczyk, where I think there was a certain level of arrogance to her, where I think she thought that her style was like the one, and she never did anything to really change it in her fights. I mean, granted, the fight with Weili Zhang was like fucking incredible, and she did do really well in that one. But it's like there comes a point where people, you need to be able to adapt to your techniques if things are starting to not work out, if people are starting to find ways to beat your strengths. And this is, I think, where it's not easy, because you've obviously built a solid base for years, which is, there's a lot of things that you've learned to trying to unlearn those motor skills. It's not easy, but the ability, as you said, Robbie, your will to learn or ability to learn is where, I guess, then that makes you a greater fighter. I think GSP is probably the best example to me, of a person who's just has that ability or willingness to absorb new information.
But I think GSP's changes with tweaks. Once you get to that upper level, like Kamaru Usman is one of the best wrestlers, right? Very few in that welterweight division are going to be like, I'm a striker, so I'm going to learn wrestling because I can out-wrestle Kamaru Usman. It's not. It's making those tweaks to give you the best chance to win. And I think that's what GSP was brilliant at, was you spot a bit of a weakness, you can use your skills better in this way. And I think that's where, at the upper levels, especially kind of UFC title as well, it's being able to change your style just a little bit to kind of give you more chance of winning, and then kind of training a specific game plan and working on specific things to help you to win. And I think that's where GSP like really came through. The jabs with Koscheck was like unbelievable, and Jake Shields as well. Just stay away from the ground. I don't think you're going to relearn the sport at the top level, but I think I think it's being coachable for adjustments.
Well, I mean, there are a couple of people who relearn the sport at the top level. I mean, just look at Ortega in his last match. Completely changed, right?
True.
But I do see what you mean. People get to the top with a style. They're not about to completely overhaul it in the worry that it's going to change something. But, if your style is good enough to get to the top, I think, there's often very small adjustments you can always make to keep you up there. And I guess then the most important aspects of a fighter are split across the two different roles of being receptive to your trainer, which is about making those tweaks and be able to learn that specific information, and listening to your coach, in which case it's going to be more about less techniques and more understanding that you have to do more jiu-jitsu or you have to do more of this or that. It's about still being receptive to information, but whereas the trainer part is about being receptive to and learning specific abilities, the other one is being more open-minded that someone else might know it better than you. And if that coach is going to be your sensei and your guide, it's about being able to be guided.
Yeah, so exactly, and that's, to me, what you're saying there. It sounds to be like the ability, well, just being humble, being a humble person can help you a lot as a fighter. Because if you're cocky, if you're arrogant about your abilities, I'm sure it got a lot of fighters far, that like arrogance and cockiness, and I'm sure it can get you far. But to me, it's not sustainable. And people who have a level of humility to them will always do better.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't even have to be sort of general humility. You might be really arrogant in press conferences and stuff. But yeah, it's about being humble enough to take on the information from your coach and your trainer. You at least have to be humble of just them. At least of just them.
Yeah. Yeah. So so then the other
as well then, isn't there? It's kind of,
what's that? Sorry,
there's a discipline element as well. Like I'm the first one to say my discipline is pretty bad. I like a kind of Domino's and I like some bad food. If you're going to get to the top, it's having that humility to seek out the right training partners, being kind of coachable enough to listen to the criticisms and say you should try this and do this, but then also being disciplined enough to implement it. Everybody can sit here and say, I'm going to go and learn this because my coach said so, but pulling the trigger and doing it for an extended period of time requires that discipline.
Yeah,
it's a fair point. Maybe that's going to be up there as well.
Jocko Willink would agree. Jocko Willink would agree with you.
It would indeed. So it's going to be the coachability, but the discipline is also important, because I think the main thing that differentiates people is the ability to grind away and continue to learn a skill long term. That is the main thing that makes you good. It's the hard work beats talent kind of thing. You might not be as good as someone technically, but if you're going to stick at it longer, probably going to be better.
That's why every jiu-jitsu gym loses blue belts.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, I can an example that comes to mind when it comes to discipline is someone like, for example, Dan McGowan, who we had on the podcast. When he's I'm sure a lot of his friends, they were going out when he was 16 or 16 to 18, probably 16 a bit too early, but who knows? 18, going out, getting drunk, going parties, and he's there, going to Thailand, basically fighting stadiums. It takes a lot of discipline to make sure that you're not pulling yourself in the direction of your peers. Like I'm sure he had friends in Thai boxing, but being at the same age, your peers are probably doing something else. So you have to be, even at that early stages of a career, discipline comes in. Not only in MMA, but in other sports, in other combat sports.
And I think at that point, that's where a coach helps a lot as well in goal setting. I think a lot of people go into this sport without setting clear goals of what they want to do. And they don't have to be kind of 15, 20-year goals, but kind of help that transition from while your friend's getting drunk in a park. You've had a chat with your coach and he's like, actually, I think you're pretty good. I think you could go to this level. I think you're good enough to train, fight, and do this. What do you want to get out of it? What are your goals? And then your coach is learning more about you. And
well, that's the motivation thing coming into it again. You have to know how to motivate your fighter, because you can be as disciplined as you like, but unless you can see where you're getting to, unless you can see the thing you're being disciplined for, it's kind of pointless, because well, firstly, the discipline will probably run out a lot faster if there's not a clear position you're trying to get to. But also, you just might not be doing the right thing. You need to know where you're going in order to, use your discipline and put yourself on that track.
Yeah, because if you're in it, if you're already in the stream, so to speak, it's you're very subjective. So you need that objective side of someone like a coach to be able to see your path, your trajectory objectively, and steer you in the right direction. So I totally agree. Because being disciplined, you can be disciplined, but you can be going in the wrong places. Even as you're disciplined in doing certain things, you might be going the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. So
yeah,
for coaches then, so we've got the motivating a fighter, knowing how to let them explore different things, and understanding a fighter and having the trust from them to use your guidance. So it's about those different aspects for the main important bits for a coach. Whereas for a fighter, it's about the receptibility to knowledge and being able to take information on board, as well as the discipline to follow through with the guidance your coach gives you, and to stick with those different things that you're learning throughout your process. And those are probably the two most important aspects for a fighter.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please consider subscribing to the podcast and checking us out on YouTube, Facebook and Instagram under the name Combat Thoughts. We'll see you next time.